Bliss and Grit is an entirely listener-supported show. Supporting us is also designed to support you through keeping the episodes rolling, but also through rewards for your donation, like a Getting Started guide, a private forum, and downloadable meditations. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/bliss and grit. Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're having conversations about the awakening spiritual path and what does that even mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, the beauty and the crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? Thank you for being here as a listener. We hugely appreciate it. If you want to stay up to date on all things Bliss and Grit and get a weekly digest of the resources that we are currently loving, you can go to blissandgrit.com to subscribe. And if you're wanting more in-depth support as you navigate your own path and internal process, we both see clients privately. So feel free to go to the website for more information on that as well. The last thing before we head into the conversation, we do sometimes curse. So if you are in non-swearing company, you may want to wear headphones. Okay, here we go.
Hello, Brooke.
Hey, Vanessa.
Here we are again. Decoding our psyches and spirits. Okay, well, today will be one of those field reporter episodes, as I am going to report something that I noticed in my field, and we will see where it takes us. Okay, so recently, I've been thinking a lot about conditioning. Sort of what we spend our spare time doing. Pretty much my hobby. And of course, I'm self-reflecting on my own. And, I've been thinking about kind of the blueprints that we inherit when we're young, kind of the scripts on who we are and what the world is like and how those get impressed upon our innocent little open neurobiological beings. And so I've been thinking like, oh, okay, cool. I can see these patterns that still arise in me that I'm ready to see further shift in. Like if I have any control over it, maybe it's grace, but here's what I'm ready for. And I started to notice something like, oh, well, what was coming up in the field? Like what was coming up in my life? Like, oh, there's a situation where I'm judging someone, right? Like, and like my mind is kind of fixated on it. I know not to, I know higher than that, but my mind keeps returning back to it. So I was reflecting on that and thinking about that. Like, what is this, Because it had popped up in a couple of places at once. And then I was like, well, maybe this is just my earlier imprint. Growing up in my family, there was, judgment abound. I kind of think if we're living in a dualistic world and we're mostly in dualistic families, it's probably a pretty common experience. But my parents are super opinionated and they can go to judgment really quick. And ridicule is a pretty commonly used technique in our family. So I was thinking, all right, well, I guess I just picked up on this belief system, this world is a judgmental place. And then also maybe I picked up on these patterns in like a really subconscious way, right? Like, oh, when you feel this trigger, you move to judgment or you move to ridicule or something like that. I don't really ridicule, like that in my mind. But so I was thinking about all that and I was talking about that with my mentor. And I think it has some measure of validity, right? But then I kind of had this insight when I started to look a little closer. Because what comes with that is, okay, so I'm running these patterns of judgment and I inherited them from my childhood. And that's just part of like the worldview and everything. But when I started to look closer, I realized, but I'm not really judging people all the time. In fact, not that often. Mm-hmm. I mean, I sit with clients all day long. I don't have a single judgment. That's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
the vast majority of my relationships are lacking in judgment. Even my husband, I mean, who I see every day, I don't move into judgment on. I rarely even do it with my family anymore, though every once in a while. So I was like, wait, maybe I am personalizing something that's not exactly something to be personalized, right? Maybe I'm making an assumption in ideal land that I am a judgmental person. And that's fine. Even that, while it may be true, and that exploration may have some richness in it, it's an innocence. But maybe that container is too small and maybe I'm missing something. And I started to look again, and it was these couple of situations that popped up over the last month. And it was like, in both cases, what I noticed was at the same time as there was judgment, there was a discernment on my part that was happening in the background that either I didn't agree with something, like something they were saying, but I was like just kind of going along with it, or something they were doing, or I wasn't really, I just wasn't agreeing with this resonance. I wasn't in co-resonance with them. There was something that was off or out of alignment, we could say. So then I started thinking, well, what if judgment was just the way that my system, my body, mind knew to signal me misalignment, right? Do something, see something, heal something, shift something, say something, right? Like this experience isn't for you. Now, one of these situations, when it recently resolved, the judgment was gone completely. And so that kind of got me thinking like, wow, how much are we labeling ourselves and misunderstanding and personalizing something? Because judgment doesn't feel good. And most of us conscious people, we don't really want to be in that state of mind. Like we know that that's out of harmony with oneness. But there it is, right? It's happening. And so then we make ourselves wrong or bad, or we focus on how can I fix myself from judging. And maybe we're missing these other subtleties or external cues like, oh, that is just an outcropping of the only way you know how to interpret it because you're conflict avoidant and you are not mobilizing in a way that your intuition is directing you for a greater alignment.
Yeah.
And that's it. There we go.
And there we go. You're like,
let's talk about that.
Let's talk about
do that. Yeah.
Yeah. This has been on my mind a lot, and in client work, certainly I've noticed this in myself, and in client work, because I have a different vantage point, because it's another person outside of myself.
So much easier.
Yeah, right? You get to see
things.
and
we hold them in such high regard.
Yes,
so
there's so
you
much
see things
love.
through the most loving eyes that you could possibly see through.
Yeah. And you're holding someone in quite a spacious amount of love. So you perceive things differently. And I would say that whatever phrase you want to use to describe people who are on this path, right? Judith Blackstone calls them spiritually sensitive people, empathic people. But basically the kinds of people who are interested in becoming more conscious of their patterns of psyche, becoming more conscious of what spirit actually means and actually is, and shifting how they behave in the world and experience the world. And what I've noticed is that with this group of people, which we're obviously included in because we're running basically the fan club for that with the show here, it becomes a very strong and very fast impulse to automatically look at, well, what is it about me that's out of alignment here?
Yeah, what am I doing wrong here?
Right. The very fast translation is, what's wrong with me that I am being judgy, feeling angry, feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, that is so quickly interpreted through a lens of what's wrong with me that I am this way, and how do I fix it? And fix it is usually in that case meant like, how do I get it together so that I'm not bothering myself or other people anymore? Like, how do I become more inert and not the one with these unpleasant things rolling around in relational situations or internally? And a phrase that I'm using a lot with myself and with clients is that for people who are oriented that way, it's actually very, very healthy to have an inquiry practice where you can ask yourself in those circumstances, like you were describing, Vanessa, this doesn't run all the time. It's just suddenly there's this like little bit of perseveration of judgment, and it stands out because it's not your normal way of being. You don't behave that way all the time.
Right. If I did, I wouldn't notice it. That's a great point.
Exactly.
Like, if you can notice it like that.
There's something, right? Like there's some grit in the oyster or clam. I don't know what makes a pearl, but to go with the metaphor, there's something that is calling the attention. And so if we can take a moment and use the inquiry, like, well, what is it? If I'm noticing the grit, what is it that I might be perceiving accurately in this situation? And when I've used that phrase, sometimes I've noticed clients will even take that internally, right? My conditioning is about being judgmental or being quick towards rage, and those things might be true. We all grow up in family of origins who have, certain kinds of conditioning and cultures that have certain ways of being. But if we can just take a moment and disrupt that impulse of always driving really hard internally towards ourselves about what we need to root around and uproot and pull out of ourselves so that we can just be better, not ruffle any feathers, not have anything seemingly low vibes or heavy or unpleasant about us. So when I say, what is it about this that I might be perceiving accurately, I actually mean look out there. What is it out there? Whether it's relationships or setups of your life that are causing distress. And what is it about your tangible, practical life that could be attended to in a way where you could be really compassionate towards yourself and say, this really distressing thing, or even mildly distressing thing, I'm going to take this off my plate. And now I realize that sometimes that's easier said than done, because sometimes the distressing things are, caretaking for loved ones. And, so I'm not saying that this is a simple, shut it down formula, but that we can just start to inquire, what is it out there actually that I might be perceiving accurately and that's causing me distress? Not because I'm bad, but it's bringing these responses forward in me.
Sure. I think as you were speaking, I was thinking, well, sure. The way I've kind of approached life is if I could get better and solve it, I will. Right. I'd way rather do the inner work and evolve out of a pattern than deal relationally in particular. I'll change my life all day long. Like if I have to change my career, I'll change it. If I have to change where I live, I'll change it. But if I have to tell that person or do that thing or, whatever, the relational stuff is where it gets hard, because that's where the threat was in my life. And who knows what other reasons, right? Whatever else this soul brought into this incarnation, whatever that is. But that's where it gets really hard. And so on the one hand, it's this beautiful quality, right? Like if I can evolve a greater perspective that transforms this for me, I will. But on the other hand, sometimes that can A, take a lot of time and work, and B, it's the intention underneath it, right? Like when the intention is so I can avoid dealing with X, Y, and Z, or the intention is to make ourselves wrong rather than anyone else, or the intention is to hide, to play small, to keep the identity structure of the giver, whatever your thing is. If the intention is not in alignment with the highest good, but is more a byproduct of that protective personality system, well, then it's fine and it'll be fine. Like we've all done it. But it just means we can keep spinning in a certain belief system that's not in service, which is there's something wrong with me and everything is my job. And if I could just fix myself, then I can find this state of harmony in the world that I imagine exists someday in the future, and it relies on me fixing every single little thing about myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what does the fixed self even look like? And you and I talk about this plenty because it's a form of bypass, but the idea of the one, right? The one who doesn't have negative emotions, who never gets emotionally triggered, who certainly doesn't feel anger. That's a big spiritual no-no, right? That one day we'll get to the point where we never have to set a boundary. We never have to point out something that is overburdening us because we're going to be so good at just laying in whatever mud we're put in.
Like adaptive ninjas.
That's right. That it's not going to be a problem. I think it's a very interesting construct we can get that we can be, first of all, so willing to be the ones who always take the bullet, which makes me sad. It breaks my heart a little that we're always so willing to take the bullet labeled something wrong with me.
Right.
I got this. I'll fix it. I'll get better. I'll do better. I'll try harder. I'll see more. I'll expose more. I'll break more chains of conditioning. So that what? So that we're not people with opinions and feelings and things that either do or do not suit us, just like any other person. Like this is just not working out is a hard thing to say. So I think we have to, first of all, look at when are we standing on a foundational belief that says there's something wrong with me. And I think that this is pretty insidious because those of us who are on healing paths, God bless us. I mean, oh my God, fucking God, like we're willing to do the work that so much of culture is not willing to do.
The lungs filtering the pain of the whole third dimension so we can purify it. Bless our heart.
Bless us for doing that because holy shit, like if I could just like tip the percentage of people doing that, we would live in a real different world. So it's not a problem that that's our impulse. It's a divine gift and a superpower, quite frankly. But sometimes the insidious piece of this is that it becomes so much a part of our life for so long that we start to believe that the game is, I'm going to figure out what's wrong with me and fix it, which has this whole fundamental belief there's something wrong with me, wrong with me, wrong with me, wrong with me. And then we can't see outside of that filter. What if there's something right with me? What if there's a shit ton right with me and I'm perceiving something accurately? Like, this isn't working out. I'm going to give a super benign example, right? Like I have somebody helping me out handyman stuff at my house. I've spent like 3 months trying to get basic things like quotes for painting, or could you come back that second time and treat that sink for mold? And I was doing the whole like be nice thing. It's like, this just isn't working out. For something even that simple where it's so low stakes, who cares, right? Like find somebody else to help you around the house. But it still takes a moment to go, oh, this isn't a fit. Like I don't need to tell myself a story about how I could even tell a story about I need to be better about being more assertive. The problem is I'm too passive. No, I need to be nicer. No, I need to be more patient. No, this is just the way it goes. It's like, it's just not working out. It's really simple. It's what I'm perceiving accurately.
Well, one of the things I've been talking about this week, it's funny, I didn't even think of this when we began the conversation, but I've been talking a lot about the genius of adaptation at an earlier phase in our lives, right? Like, so our family is the world to a certain regard. It may be for you, it was also a community if you had a tight-knit community. But in the earliest stages, it's usually our family. So our family is the world. So if our family is judgmental, comparing, envious, ridiculing, if they're dangerous, whatever they are, the extrapolation is this is the world. And the world isn't going to change, right? So then we intelligently, we can't leave and we can't change it, right? That's the world. That's how it is. So we adapt, right? Well, if this is the world, then I will. Some people will lie behind their parents' back and do what they want anyway. Some people will repress their feelings and their desires. Some people will learn to people please or fawn. Like we will adapt. And that's genius because we don't know how else to cope in something that feels unacceptable, right, to the little beings that we are. And then we grow up and now that's still in place, right? Well, the world is like this, so I guess I'll just adapt. It's like, oh, the world is full of conflict. If it's not this person, it's the next one. Or the world is full of like, people being antagonistic against you. So if it's not this one, it'll be the next one. So I may as well get better. I may as well evolve. And it's an adaptation strategy. And it's kind of genius, except for when you're an adult, the world that you think exists may not be the one in reality that exists for you, or there just may be so many other possibilities and so many other potentialities. And really, it's almost more like when you were talking about like, who is it we want to be? The person who's like, nothing ever ruffles my feathers. Yes, that is who I wanted to be. But when you were painting the opposite picture, I'm like, that feels more aligned what you're saying, like I have preferences and opinions and all of these things. That's where we realize like, oh, this is just the fantasy of the young one, like still stuck in a loop, right? Where she's adapting to an experience with her best coping mechanism she knew, right? But we can evolve, we can mature into this new way where it's like, well, I don't have to just get better at coping. I can take a stand. I can leave. I can make a request. I can ask for something and so on and so forth. So I really love that. And then the other thing I was thinking is like, okay, so how would source or God or universe, whatever you like, how would it communicate with us? If not with an emotion or a feeling, like a thought, a sensation, right?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, I always screw this joke up, but did you ever hear the joke about, I'm sure I've tried to tell this before, about the rabbi that's sitting on the roof in the flood?
Right.
Right. And so the rabbi's sitting on the roof and people keep coming by and the water's rising up and they're like, hey, rabbi, jump on the boat. We'll help you. Hey, rabbi, jump in the helicopter. We'll help you. And the water keeps rising and the rabbi keeps saying, no, God's got me. God's got me. And the rabbi dies and they go up to God and he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And he's like, I sent a boat. I sent a helicopter.
Right.
It's like we have an expectation that inner knowing may be different than it is. I don't know what we think it is. Like maybe angel wings flapping in our ear and divine bells ringing.
Yeah, that'll always feel like a sort of a more blissful end of the spectrum is interesting because I think that this is where we get into spiritual misnomers, right?
Yeah. And it's like, well, what if it's your intuition, right? And what if your intuition, which is your higher self talking to you, is showing up in saying like a judgment or a feeling. And really the judgment is probably just a reaction to a sensation or a feeling that you're mislabeling and then you're going into like an inner war over. But, it's going to show up in some felt experience, especially for empaths. For someone else, maybe it'll show up as a vision or a knowing. I'm not saying it can't get more clarified than that. But for many people at this end of the spectrum, like it's like, it'll show up because it doesn't feel
right, because it's
good
not
or right
for you. You don't like it.
If it's there for you, if it's there for you as a gift, something to evolve it with, something that like you're meant to be meeting in this lifetime, you'll know because you can't leave, right? Like you were saying, the elderly parent who's sick, who you're taking care of. Of course, maybe there's nuance. Maybe you could ask your siblings to help.
For exactly how can I simplify my life? How can I have more support?
There could always be nuance you didn't see, but there's going to be plenty of situations we can't just change. And then that may be the offering. That may be the thing we're here evolving in this lifetime. But many of them are simple. And it is maybe just as simple as, oh, life's inviting me out of this space that is misaligned. Yeah. And it's inviting me into something new, whether I know why or not. It doesn't even necessarily matter.
Yeah. And for the sake of, funsies, if we personify life, sometimes when we're in those situations where even if, let's say, we become aware, okay, this isn't a problem with me. I've done all these management strategies about how I could just be less effective or more amiable about this whole thing. But turns out I need to remove something from my daily life. I need to, or set a boundary, have a hard conversation. Oftentimes we're up against those things that we really don't want to do if we're conflict avoidant, sensitive people. And I like sometimes thinking about in those moments, personifying life, like life is this super, super, super loving presence that is just, what is it begging, wishing I could have a chance to experience with this human life? What is it on the sidelines just cheering me on? Like, I know you've got this. I know you can do this. Because if you see the problem is not you, it's just something that's out of alignment. And so time to do the thing that brings it into alignment, whatever the thing is. I know, if this is personified life talking, I know you're going to have a chance to experience the profound relief of, what if there isn't something wrong with me? What if I'm perceiving something accurately? And B, the opportunity to say, I'm here. I exist. My existence and my experience has merit. So I'm going to step right into my knowing, and I'm going to have an experience of my own power. And for everyone who's listening, I would invite you to feel what it feels like when I say the word power, because I think we all get really frequently scared of that word because we've seen it so misused in culture or, interpersonally. But the healthy side of power is just, I'm a person and my existence has merit and my experience is valid. And I say, no, thank you to this. I say, yes, thank you to this. And that's to a huge degree what we're actually just here to experience, is the truth of what's actually yes, please, or no, in our lives.
And then trust that for oneness's purposes, it's all good in the hood, right? Like there's an alignment. Everyone's getting what they came to get.
Right.
It's funny when I get to talk about these things with Mario, my husband, because like this is not his life experience that he needs, right? He's got his own things about probably control and like letting go and vulnerability and things like that. But it's not this. So if I'm like, the other day I had two friends that had a conflict and I'm like, so nervous. And then I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. And then like, just like, and I know it's silly, right? But there it is. It's running. So I'm like, let me just verbalize this. And he's like, okay, like even stuff like this.
People are going to do what they're going to do, whatever.
I like, if I may have a difficult time having a conversation like I did in these two examples, he's like, okay, I don't know why. Just fire that handyman, Vanessa. Like just move on, right?
Yeah, and it's not working out.
No, and there's absolute clarity in him, and he absolutely would do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So it's funny because you can really see like, holy moly, that vibrational codependency, I'm here for different things than he is. Right. And these are the things we're unraveling. And look, the truth is that I will often go back to my experience, and that's because I will work with the mirror of life. And we've talked about that on this show. And I will get curious about like, what am I being invited towards, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's being invited to take a stand or it's being invited to find patience, right? It's just that whole process can so easily get corrupted by, what am I doing wrong? Like, what do I have to fix? Right. So it's almost like not an open inquiry, like, oh, what's life inviting me to? Should I take a stand for myself, or should I be patient? Because, P.S., some people listening need the patience, not the take a stand. Right. That's their medicine.
And in general, we're having a conversation to empaths. It would be a very different conversation for somebody who needed to mature their empathy.
Exactly.
Talking about over empathizers.
So, because that's what we are. So we're talking about our experience, but it's not an actually open inquiry. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me that I should fix? And it's still getting, well, less and less, right? That's why we're having this conversation. But I still notice it gets stuck in certain eddies, right? Like, just be compassionate, just be forgiving,
Yeah.
We know how to do that. And if that doesn't make it go away, maybe there's a good reason and you've been missing the actual message that is trying to come through for you, which is do something other than that. Take action now.
And if our persona is the kind of persona that we're describing through this episode, where we're organized to always be the one to take the fall, right? Like, I'm going to fix myself up so that everyone else doesn't, get ruffled in any way. If we have operated that way for most or all of our lives, we will often be surrounded, of course, naturally, by people who expect us to be that way. So there will be habits of interpersonal stuff in our daily lives where there's an expectation that we will be the one to make it nice for everyone else, or even that there is something wrong with us, that people can be like, yeah, why are you so anxious? Or why are you so judgy? So I just want to bring that forward, because if we've always been operating out of an assumption about ourselves, we'll be surrounded by people who, and we teach people how to treat us and we teach people what we are. And so people are attracted to us in relationship, whether that is family, coworker, intimate partner, whatever. They have certain expectations of us. So one of the things that's challenging about this, when we stop going, what's wrong with me? And we start wondering, what am I perceiving accurately? And then step 2 is, okay, what needs to be brought into alignment out here? People will be surprised. Even if it's not a giant action, obviously it's going to be more obvious if it's something that genuinely affects, for example, your whole household or something. But that doesn't mean that we need to go back to just getting better at laying in the muck, and that we can, through our actions and through our demonstrations, teach people to see us in another way too, right? Like, yeah, we're also the people with needs and preferences and feelings and clarity and a voice and an opinion. And so just be aware that might happen, that there might be some pushback of like, no, you're the one that's always just working on yourself because there's something wrong with you and I need for you to be calm now. And it's like, no, there's something that's out of alignment here. Can feel a little risky in that situation.
Yeah. And it really, you never know, because you may even think they expect something from you that they don't even expect.
Like, sure. It might be a huge relief of like, oh my God, you finally just said no thank you. Ugh.
You're here, right? Like, you're here doing you, and big trust can be gained, because there's not this like, this word manipulation can sound really negative, but if you think of fawning, it's like there's something you're hiding. You're attending to one thing to stay safe, but you're not sharing something else, like maybe your preference not to be doing that thing, whatever it is. So it can feel really relieving to people, like, alignment. That's so trustworthy. You're all out in the open. So it can go a lot of ways. And I think the other thing that's always worth saying, going back to what I said about open inquiry. So this is why evolution is funny and requires awareness first and compassion alongside it. I was thinking first or second. It really requires awareness and compassion, because when people will then listen to this and they'll say, you're right, I've been too empathic, I've been really codependent, and I have to take a stand for myself. Great. But haven't you seen, Brooke, people who then almost like they develop a new persona, the one who doesn't take shit. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, that wasn't exactly it either, right? Because it's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it does not require ball busting. Like, it's just a matter of being clear.
Or maybe in one moment it requires you taking a stand, but maybe in another moment it requires patience. And maybe in another moment it is something coming up for you to heal. It's a projection on your part. And maybe in another moment it's telling someone to get the hell out of your face. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's almost like I said, I can inquire, but my inquiry can be slanted to what can I fix so I don't have to deal in the external world. Our inquiry can slant in any direction. And the really nuanced, juicy, alive spot is what's true now, mm-hmm. right? Like what is being invited and called for? What am I feeling? Like what was the question that you said? Can you say your question again?
What is it that I am perceiving accurately?
Right. That's a great question. What am I perceiving accurately? Because there's something you're perceiving accurately. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you have another question, and I'm not saying you need to, but just to talk about having this whole open inquiry is what's being invited in me, or what's this remind me of? Mm-hmm. Does this remind me of anything? Just that. That may let you know, oh my God, I need some love because this one's pushing up against that 4-year-old real hard, mm-hmm. right? So I just feel that with everything, a lot of the unraveling, a lot of the seeing through of these different survival veils, right, that obstruct our true aligned presence, it's a bit of a nuanced process. Be willing for each moment the answer to be a little different for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I might be going a little off left field here, but as another way of attending to this, this is just me personally, a practice that I'm playing with right now. I'm not, sharing this with clients because it's just a little experiment. But as I heal from fawn or habits to be a little bit of a contortionist to make the space always feel good and nice, I have found it very helpful to huff the vibes of people who have no fawn in their persona, who I respect and admire. So
not jerks.
Right. I don't mean belligerent assholes. I mean people who are really in alignment, and in particular women who are totally happy to bring their power forward, but it doesn't have this rawr charging forward. It's just they're not gonna placate. So hilarious example. You're gonna love this, Vanessa. I have been listening to the Ron Burgundy podcast quite a lot lately.
Oh, I didn't even know that existed.
That's a real thing. Oh yeah. August and I listened to it on the school commute. And it is Will Ferrell playing his character Ron Burgundy from the movie Anchorman, for those of you who don't know, who's basically
compete with this hilarity.
Oh, it is so funny. And what's most hilarious about the show is they have actual real people on that he interviews. You have neuroscientists on, but he's interviewing them as the character That's Ron Burgundy.
Hilarious.
So recently they had on Gloria Steinem. Hilarious. So the gag is Ron Burgundy's character is this news anchor from the 1970s who's a total misogynist, woman's man, whatever. And here's Gloria Steinem. So it's already set up as a joke. Everyone's in on the joke. She knows she's talking to a fictional character who has a certain persona, but it was still so helpful, right? So here's something totally non-threatening. It's funny. Everyone's in on the joke, and yet I can just resonate with her vibe. This is a woman who has zero fawn in her persona. And so he'll, say something that's dumb because that's the joke, and she'll just, and he'll have a moment where he'll be like, Miss Steinem, are you still there? Yeah, I'm still here. Okay. It was really funny because she's just, even though she's interacting with a character, still being herself. And there's a way when you encounter that. And when I want more ferocity, I'll watch Greta Thunberg's speech to the UN. She immediately starts talking. She says something the audience perceives as funny and they all start to giggle. She doesn't do the slightest bit of being warm winky with the audience, little smile, little giggle, little let's warm up the room. She's like, I'm fucking here on a mission. I'm just going to keep charging forward. I don't know why these people are laughing. So, different energy, because there's this real mission-led ferocity in that speech. But there is something about like, here at a safe distance, I'm not trying to make myself pretend to be them, but I can just admire them and just huff the vibe. Just
tune into the frequency.
Yeah, feel the frequency of what that feels like. That when the audience or the other person expects you to do the sort of work the room, make everyone feel comfortable, play a little small, be a little cute, and you don't, it's like my system goes like, oh, like that's an option on the menu too.
Yes. Breaking out of expectations. Exactly. This is a possibility. Well, I know I've mentioned this on the show, but for all of you just listening, I love listening to Oprah interview Byron Katie. And Oprah was all, but how do you say no when like family members ask you for money? And she's like, well, let's role play it. So Oprah role plays the family. Bits. So for all of you who haven't seen it, Oprah is just all role playing, right? So Oprah's like saying to Byron Katie as if it's someone speaking to Oprah, like, can I have money from you? Like something like that. And Byron Katie's just like, no.
So great. And it's like, it's so warm and loving. And there's literally no other word except for no.
No. Oh. One was like very sweet. I know you'd like that. But no.
But no.
And it's so funny. One of the things that has happened over time as I've matured, not matured out of this pattern fully, but have matured, is you realize you really need a lot less words than you think.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like you don't need to defend or explain, because that arose as an adaptation to believing someone's going to take away your power or stomp you down or hate you or judge you. That arose as an adaptation. We'll like try to give a reason so the powers that be, which is this projection on the other person, won't crush us, right, in whatever way and hurt our feelings. And then you realize, like, actually the power is within me. And even if they don't like it, that's okay. Like, I'm okay. I'm safe and everything's wonderful and I get to be a good person. So then you realize, like, I don't need all the words. I don't need all the confusion and the explanation. I can just say, like, no, thank you. No, thanks. Mm-hmm. No. Oh. No. If I ever get up to the point in this lifetime where someone asks me for something that I care about and they're close to me and all I say is no, period. Like,
the heavens will part. Angels with those long, fancy old school trumpets will come on out. It's going to be great.
Oh, hilarious.
No. Yeah. And we can role play at a distance, by really observing people who are at a masterful level with this.
Yeah, I like the exercise. I use this a lot in general. At one point, one of our mentors told me for fierce, like, go ahead and embody Beyonce if that's what you're feeling, right? Because it's like a fierce movement, not like Greta Thunberg fierce, but just like the movement, the way she like powerfully moves her body has this like energy to it. These are transmissions. They're all frequencies. When you sit with an enlightened teacher, you get a transmission. What does that mean? It's like you're attuning to the frequency they're embodying in that state of oneness and samadhi. Well, the same thing with all of these different flavors of the rainbow. We can attune to that frequency. And just like we were speaking about in the episode before on expectations and cultural conditioning, it's a way to take us into a new potentiality, right? So we were taught, or we got the picture that we have to be a certain way, people pleasing or fawning or compassionate or forgiving, whatever it was, but that was a box we live in. Like there's no other options available. And when you attune to different frequencies as you did, whoever you like, they're transmissions, right?
Yeah.
And you get to say, oh, I can resonate at this frequency. And then your nervous system starts to say, maybe this is okay. Maybe this is familiar. And then that starts to open up as a field of potentiality for you.
Yeah, it's good self-energy medicine, really. Just bringing to your awareness these other possibilities are on the menu here in this realm. What does it feel like to observe that? What does it feel like to imagine trying that on? It can be really helpful. Thank you so much for being a part of our community and for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. That is also where you can subscribe to get our weekly digest of what we're up to and other resources that we're currently finding helpful. If you're wanting more support, blissandgrit.com also has more information on our private coaching practices. We're so grateful for the reviews you've written, for the membership support that so many of you have provided at Patreon, and for all the notes that you send. Thank you. We'll be back next week.